Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Martin Dreyfus Show. The breaking news is you don't gotta wear a mask on an airplane anymore. A federal judge has come out and voided the mandate as unconstitutional, essentially. And the breaking news has just now come out as federal law. So next time you get on an airplane, you don't have to wear a mask. Unless, of course, I guess private enterprises say otherwise, which could be very possible, but we'll see on that. For now, let's get into the breaking news.
Masks are not required on airplanes after the travel mask mandate was struck down. That means the TSA will not enforce the rule at airports and other transportation hubs. The news comes after a federal judge in Florida today ruled that the CDC exceeded its authority and failed to follow proper rulemaking. The question now is, will the federal government appeal that decision? Well, the Association of Flight Attendants is weighing in tonight, urging calm from passengers, saying it usually takes 24 to 48 hours to implement new procedures. The CDC still recommends masks for all travelers. Now, all this comes as COVID-19 cases are once again on the rise, driven by that BA.2 subvariant.
So another subvariant. I am very curious to see the mortality rate. That's really where I kind of draw my eyes to. The last variant, Omicron, I don't think that's how you say it, but that's how I've been pronouncing it, and that's how it's stuck in my head, had a super high infection rate, but it wasn't really killing anybody. So when we think of, a very low mortality rate with a very high infection rate, it kind of leads me to think of the common cold. However, being that this virus mutates so often, that if you catch a strain that has a high mortality rate, that common cold goes to more of a Spanish flu in its prime kind of idea. So the new variant is going to definitely depend, in my opinion, on the actual mortality rate and how it actually affects us as citizens. Now, of course, the CDC is still going to recommend it, but the news is that the CDC is not policymakers. They can't just come out and force rules that we have seen over the past 2 years. Do I agree with that? To a point, and the only reason I say to a point is because the time it takes for mandates to go through the House and the Senate takes so long that when COVID-19 first came out, it would have taken too long for the United States to have gotten a mask mandate established and to have gotten rid of the widespread epidemic as fast as we did. So it's kind of a balancing act, but I do see where the federal government is coming from, and it does make sense to me. I'm assuming why they've waited so long to make this decision, because up until now, it was kind of necessary, and for them to void it would have caused more public harm than public good.
CBS's Nikki Batiste is going to start us off from Philadelphia, where an indoor mask mandate was just reinstated. There's a lot to get news to get to. Good evening, Nikki.
Nora, good evening. We are just getting clarity from the administration on that judge's ruling today, saying they are reviewing the judge's order, but that for now, the TSA will not enforce the mask mandate on public transportation. And adding to all of that confusion, as you mentioned, there is a new mask mandate here in Philadelphia that took effect today. That means about 20,000 fans here to see the 76ers play tonight will have to mask up once again.
It makes sense, unfortunately. The reason behind it is because each state has separated guidelines to handle situations. This extends all the way to our education system where, 60% of our states aren't even meeting our national testing standards, and only 2 states exceed it, but that's a whole nother issue. States are going to be able to make their own rules. So yes, although federally maybe transportation guidelines and mandates are voided, it doesn't mean state by state that those mandates are going to be there or gotten rid of. So although this is big news because a lot of states do follow federal mandates, it's also not as a widespread mandate or voided mandate as we believe, just because a lot of states also don't follow federal guidelines. And how I feel about that is a whole way too long video.
Can now fly or ride the buses and trains mask-free. The move comes just hours after a federal judge in Florida ruled it was unlawful. Today, a U.S. district judge said the court accepts the CDC's argument that masks will limit COVID-19 transmission, but that alone was not sufficient to exceed the agency's authority. Infectious disease specialist Dr. Celine Gounder says it's still too soon.
We don't know how.
I hate to say that, but it's no longer sufficient. It's no longer sufficient to require it federally because the mortality rate is so much lower. The infection rate might be high at times, but again, so is the common cold. So today it's no longer sufficient to require this mandate beyond the CDC's power. But you can't say a year ago or 2 years ago that it wasn't sufficient because A, at any point a federal judge could have avoided this based on unconstitutional law, and B, the mortality rate and the amount of people being infected and then subsequently dying was exponentially higher than it is today. So it was no longer sufficient. I don't like that, on paper we are going to completely discredit the CDC and the efforts that they had to do to kind of ensure all of our safety over the past 2 years.
The BA2 variant is going to play out across the country. As of right now, my advice as a physician to anybody traveling on a plane would be to continue wearing a mask when you're traveling on public transportation, including on an airplane.
Meanwhile, Philadelphia is the only U.S. city bringing back indoor masks as a precaution. There has been a 67% increase in COVID cases in the last 10 days. That's an average of over 200 COVID cases per day.
I think it's a mistake.
Over 200 COVID cases a day in this city, is that a lot? That's not rhetorical. I would like an answer in the comment section because there was a time when, we're talking 50,000, tens of thousands of infections a day across the country. We reached hundreds of thousands of deaths in this country. If not, I don't remember if we broke 1 million or not. I believe we did. The fact of the matter is 67% increase is a big number, but it's an increase from obviously a very little number because 200 to 250 COVID cases a day isn't that extreme, at least in comparison, in my opinion, to what it used to be. Now, if I'm incorrect on that, please let me know in the comments section, but that's a big reason we need quantity over just percentages in a lot of these situations.
Philadelphia restaurant owner Yehuda Seychelle is concerned the revived mandate will hurt business again.
When masks were mandated, people are less inclined to go out to the city specifically. The city, there's a lot of people that live in the city, but really the city thrives off people coming from the suburbs.
A group of 22 business owners and residents is suing the city, seeking to overturn the mask mandate.
Philadelphia actually did away with the CDC guidelines.
It's really interesting. There was a big movement in Colorado Springs. A lot of restaurants opened without mask mandates to kind of stick it to the man. And I kind of feel like that was selfish in a lot of ways because at the end of the day, what they did was take away business from the majority of businesses who were following the mandates. And B, they were affecting what needed to be a global effort to get rid of this disease. Now, did it work in the end? Absolutely. Were those businesses punished? And unfortunately, are those families now forever affected because of it? Yes. And are a lot of businesses going to close due to the 2-year issues of the pandemic? Absolutely. But the fact of the matter is our economy has already been on a breaking point. This is the cycle of our economy, and sometimes unprecedented things come. And to selfishly put your business over, at a time, I wouldn't say anymore, but at a time, people's lives and over other people's businesses is just wrong. I do like that they are going for a lawsuit. It's a little more of a legal process, but it's a mask mandate. They're not banning dining again. I feel like the reactions to this are just a little too extreme. You know, we're just kind of at the tail end of this. We could do what we need to do and just be done with it, rather than fighting every step of the way.
It's a standard, and they've invented their own guidelines. They're making this stuff up.
In response to the lawsuit, the city says it has the legal authority.
The role of the CDC is really to provide minimum guidelines in terms of what is safe. So a city like Philadelphia can decide to be more aggressive about what they require, and other places might choose not to be so aggressive.
It is now up to individual airlines to decide if they will require masks. Delta, United, and Alaska Airlines are the first to say, effective immediately, that passengers do not have to wear masks on their planes. But just to reiterate, Nora, the CDC does still recommend wearing a mask on public transportation.
Well, that's interesting because now that Delta, Alaska, and the other airline, I apologize, I couldn't remember all three, have come out and said it, it's going to set a precedent for what other airlines are going to do. And either this is going to be great because we're at a time where this disease isn't really affecting our country as it used to, and it's just about damn time, or on the flip side, it's going to cause a lot of infections and it's going to set us back in more time, but only time will tell. So that's the news, and next time you're on a plane, it's up to you. You want to wear a mask or do you not? And if some airlines require it, you get to decide. Do you want to go on that airline or not? So that really is more of the American way to do things, and I don't really think that's an argument. Is that the best way to do things? That could be an argument.